We have lemon meringue pie. We all have a piece here, but Jacob, you got to wait a minute, right?
Ready to dig in?
No pie for you yet.
Wait.
Get to work.
So, and it's all about advisories and how things are changing. So
that is right.
Cool. Yeah.
Yes, some changes to the Weather Service and how we see alerts being issued. So we all know about advisories, watches, and warnings, but there's a lot of them. There's 122 to be precise, and all of them have a slight variation in shading or difference of color. It can get really confusing when all of them are laid out on a map, and when the National Weather Service issues an advisory, watch, or warning, we try to communicate that to you in the best way possible so that you can understand. But again, it can get confusing with all those differences. So here's the current format, and then I'll go over what's going to be changing a few years down the line. So a watch is usually issued first. That's when there's a life or property threatening event that is possible, but it's not yet certain. So we're talking about maybe a couple days before an impending winter storm, maybe a couple hours before a large severe weather outbreak, a watch would be issued. Then when that event is happening or about to happen, a warning will be issued for that life or property threatening event. Think a blizzard warning, a winter storm warning, or a severe thunderstorm or tornado warning. So you have a watch that is usually issued for a large area like this, for specifically severe weather, and then a warning is much more of a smaller polygon-based style alert for a smaller area where that severe weather is happening right now. So again, watch versus warning. That's the current system, and that's really not changing. What is changing is with advisories. We'll get into that in a second, but an advisory is an event less serious than a warning that is happening or about to happen. Think winter storm, winter weather advisory, wind chill advisory, heat advisory. Those are some examples. And they also have special weather statements. That is an event less serious or of shorter duration than an advisory that is happening or about to happen. Again, it gets kind of confusing here. So an advisory, think the winter weather advisories that we have, usually kind of in that purple color when snowfall isn't to the level of a winter storm warning. Advisories for winter weather or for usually blowing snow, for some ice accretion, or between 1 and 5 inches of snow accumulation. Once you get above 6 inches, that's when you get the watches and the warnings for winter storms. And you can get these special weather statements that I mentioned for sub-severe thunderstorms. So think for small hail, pea-sized or nickel-sized hail, or winds that are less than 55 or 60 miles per hour, a special weather statement could be issued, and then that might be upgraded to a severe thunderstorm warning if that storm continues to strengthen. So again, you have these kind of 4 tiers here, going from least severe at special weather statements, then up to advisories, then watches and warnings. And usually you go from watches to warnings once that event is happening. So here's another kind of layout of how this is currently in place, and this is what we're all used to. The watches are for possible significant weather events that are going to happen soon. That leads into warnings for the life-threatening weather events happening or about to happen. And then we have those advisories for an inconvenient weather event happening or happening soon or about to happen. So the advisory types: winter weather advisory, frost advisory, wind chill advisory, dense fog, wind advisory, and heat advisory. So not quite to the level of a warning, but all of these go into some kind of warning if the event is more life-threatening. So let's say wind chill advisory. That's for between -25 and -40 degree wind chills, whereas the wind chill warning is for -40 degree wind chills and lower. Same thing with heat advisory. That's up to 95 degree to 105 degree heat index versus the excessive heat warning is for higher than that. So again, you have these differences between advisories and warnings and watches, which gets kind of confusing. So they're going to go away from the advisories. They're going to discontinue issuing advisories in a couple of years. 2025 or later is when the process will begin to be phased out, and you'll just have watches and warnings. So a little bit more of a simplification of the hazard process. Instead of the advisories and instead of special weather statements, we'll have plain language statements. So let's say instead of issuing a winter weather advisory for a couple inches of snow, the Weather Service would just put out a statement saying light snow accumulation likely today. So it'll remain the same with these watches when we need to prepare and the warnings when we need to take action, but the advisories and the special weather statements will become these plain language headlines. And again, that's when we need to exercise caution because the event isn't to that caliber, isn't to that level of a life-threatening event for a warning to be issued. But again, we still need to be aware and this just simplifies the process of disseminating that message. So a current winter weather advisory would kind of be laid out like this. And it's going to be similar with that plain language headline in the future. It'll say, let's say, snow, hazardous travel from 4 a.m. to 11 a.m. and list out what the impacts will be. Or it could just be kind of a free text box. But again, this isn't going to be happening until a couple years down the line. There's still surveys being done to see how this will be received by the public and see how it will be implemented across the country. Because there's a lot of advisories that are different for different parts of the country, for the high terrain of the Rockies, for coastal areas, that need to be phased out and put into these plain language headlines. So 2025 or later is when it would be implemented. Kind of another project that's also being worked on in conjunction with this is that we're going to move everything to polygon-based watches and warnings instead of county-based. And this is kind of cool because sometimes here locally, Bismarck would be in a warning for, let's say, a blizzard warning, while Mandan wouldn't be because you have the Morton County, Burleigh County line there separating the Bismarck-Mandan area. Well, in the future, these kind of polygon, or these county-based warnings or watches would just become drawn on a map in a polygon, kind of like what we already see with watches and warnings. That doesn't have an ETA of when it would be implemented, but kind of being worked on in conjunction to simplify the process and give a more cohesive message of what the hazard is going to be. So the main takeaway: the advisories are going to be going away 2025 or later, being replaced by those plain language statements, which are similar to our current special weather statements, and those special weather statements are also going to be going away. So you might see a special weather statement for a sub-severe thunderstorm. That'll just also be turned into these plain language statements. So some interesting changes that have been in the years for works, and with the National Weather Service, it takes a lot of time for them to figure out what works best and then put it into the implementation process.
You know what? This was a big topic just the past couple of days.
I bet it was.
A big topic. And NOAA and with broadcast meteorologists all getting together in a big room discussing these exact changes. And again, by 2025 or thereafter, might see some of this implemented. So
I'm
good
a
stuff,
fan of
yeah.
the plain language. Makes
Yeah.
it easier to understand.
That was the key
State
takeaway.
what you need to know, and
Yeah.
that's all you
Get
need.
right to
Sounds
it.
good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah,